Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Adweek webinar. We'll be sharing 5 things you didn't know about BuzzFeed advertising. And where these insights are coming from is from an exclusive media mix modeling study. Try saying that one 3 times fast, media mix modeling. But today's webinar is being sponsored by Nielsen. I'm Stuart File, head of Adweek's Branded Content Studio, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I'm just going to take a few minutes, make sure that everyone in our audience knows what to expect from today's webinar and is also familiar with the various features of our webinar platform. Our actual presentation today should go somewhere in the 25 to 30-minute range. Afterwards, we're going to have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if at any point during today's webinar you have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool that you see there on the left side of your screen, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can during the Q&A portion, which is about 10-15 minutes at the end of our presentation. We are supporting social sharing on today's webinar, and we do urge everyone to please share some of the findings from today's webinar across your social media channels. And when you do, please use the hashtag you see there on the bottom left of our title slide, hashtag #MeasureBuzzFeed. So if you're out there on social, hey, give us a shout out. We always love it when people post their pictures and their GIFs and their memes. Love seeing large groups of people sitting in front of their screens in their conference room having a lunch and learn or whatever you've got going on. We always, be part of that conversation. But more importantly, share some of the findings today. Of course, we'll be sharing some of the things from the Adweek Webinars Twitter feed, which is at AW Webinars. So check that out and see if you're not following us there, please do. It's not too late, by the way, to invite your colleagues to join us today, and we'd really love it if they would. About 15 minutes ago, we sent everyone a final reminder email, and in there you'll find a link over to our registration page. So grab that email, grab that link, send it off to your colleagues. There's still plenty of time for them to come on over, register, and join us live. But if they cannot make it live, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand, and we're going to send a link to that on-demand recording to all of our registrants later this afternoon. So check your email about 3:30 Eastern Time. You'll get a link to the on-demand recording, and certainly feel free to share that recording as well with your colleagues if you think they'd benefit from some of this great knowledge that's going to get shared. If you want a copy of today's slides, and we often get requests for that, you will find them right now in the Event Resources tab that you see up at the top of your screen. If you are engaging with this webinar on demand in Event Resources, you'll also find an MP3 audio file of just the audio track of today's webinar. We know some people like to listen in as they might a podcast. So again, once this is on demand and after the live webinar, you can go on in there and download that. Lastly, we always urge everyone to please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars with an S. We've got a full schedule for the rest of this year, really doing 3 of them a week through just right ahead of the holiday season. So see what we've got coming up. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. You'll also get access when you go there to our archive of on-demand webinars, and that includes some from our sponsor today, Nielsen. So go on over adweek.com/webinars, sign up for something coming up. Check out one of our on-demand webinars as well. So let's move on to today's webinar, and let me take a minute here and introduce our speakers for everyone. Again, we're looking at BuzzFeed advertising, so we've got 2 great speakers from BuzzFeed and also a speaker from our sponsor, Nielsen, is going to talk about, again, this media mix modeling study that took place. So we are joined today by Shari Cleary, who's the SVP of Research, Insights, and Brand Planning over at BuzzFeed, where she oversees all advertising analytics and measurement. really uncovers insights that help brands create meaningful campaigns by engaging targeted audiences and driving real-world action, really what we all look for from our advertising. We are also joined today from BuzzFeed by Josh Peters, who's their Director of Research, actually Director of Data Partnerships, excuse me. Josh manages BuzzFeed's data partnerships spanning across tech, campaign audience strategy, privacy compliance, and advertiser partnerships. He has over 13 years of experience as a digital marketer. From Nielsen, we've got Matt Malone, who's the Senior Manager of Marketing Effectiveness. He works, again, he's Senior Client Manager on the Marketing Effectiveness Custom Innovation Team, works on e-commerce, marketing mix, syndicated mix, and other custom solutions. So Shari, Josh, and Matt, welcome. And Matt, let me pass this on over to you to begin our webinar today.
Great. Thank you so much, Stuart. Great. So we're all very aware as marketers that the landscape has changed significantly over the last 10 years with the rapid developments in technology. It's becoming increasingly complex and increasingly competitive to reach your consumer. Because of this, advertisers are often facing a decision paralysis of sorts in determining which ways to reach and engage with an increasingly accessible and digitally connected consumer. With so many methods available, it becomes even more critical for brands to compete by optimizing media spend towards tactics that are quantifiably driving sales in an efficient and effective manner. But how can advertisers do this? Marketing mix modeling is a great way of doing this because it provides advertisers with access to a fact-based and holistic snapshot of historic brand performance. Relevant marketing and non-marketing factors are collected at actionable and granular levels and are input into our advanced statistical models. By using the outputs of these models, which are our sales decompositions, our team can determine the performance of all model activities and recommend optimizations in advance of key media planning sessions in order to improve in-market outcomes. Nielsen understands that one size does not fit all. Our customized approach and expertise has been utilized over 30 industries. You can see some examples are listed above, and over 100 plus countries. With 25 years experience in insights-driven marketing ROI solutions, and over 80% coverage of fast-moving consumer goods transactions and spend, Nielsen provides the gold standard for measurement. Always happy to dig into a particular brand question or anything. I'm happy to lend our analytics to help improve your business. Now that we kind of went through a high-level overview of mix and what Nielsen does, I'm going to pass it off to Shari and Josh, who will go through the mix work we've done for BuzzFeed and some of the ways that they're using these results to improve and optimize media plans for advertisers. All right, Shari?
Great, thank you. So, first, starting at a high level, I'm sure many of you are aware of what BuzzFeed is. As a leading independent digital media company, we make over 500 pieces of content a day, and we leverage the data and innovation to reach 520 million people around the world in an average month. BuzzFeed really made a name for itself with a cross-platform distribution model that largely ushered in the era of branded native content, and we're known for some big viral hits too. Since then, BuzzFeed has grown in popularity among millennials and Gen Z audiences, and we now reach 3/4 of all millennials and over half of all Gen Z in the US per month. So something unique about BuzzFeed is, to help brands tap into this big footprint of buyers, we've continued to expand our catalog of advertising options. Offerings now range from lists and quizzes that you might know us from, to custom native content, branded videos, standard and programmatic display, commerce offerings, and so much more. Our commerce team, for example, is responsible for tasty cookware and our partnership with McCormick Spices. We have a very diverse portfolio of ways to help our partners. And we're always looking for ways to optimize. BuzzFeed wanted to access insights and learnings about how our campaign executions performed, but we lacked the transparency into the performance we needed to support advertising recommendations with objective data. And that's why we're really all here today. In an effort to deliver maximum value to CPG advertisers, we decided to commission a marketing mix modeling study to understand how our campaigns are driving value and return on investment. And to do that, we looked at 10 brands in the prepared food and liquor categories, encompassing 139 million media spend across 3 of our ad solutions. And in total, it was a 1.3 billion impressions across all of this. And to walk you through the findings, I will pass it off to my good friend, Josh Peters.
Thanks, Sherry. So, like Sherry said, we commissioned these big category studies. We focused on 2 specific categories, and that is the prepared packaged foods and the liquor category. And to start at the top, we decided to ask the question of how does BuzzFeed compare to traditional media? It's a big, scary question, but we wanted to see how we stood up against the long-standing giants of the advertising world. Good news is we actually did pretty well. So looking at some of these key findings, key finding number 1 was that we actually showed up very, very well. And looking at our ROAS on there, our return on ad spend, when we compared to the traditional media, we found that we were driving an outward revenue. So we were showing that with very small amount of reallocation of non-BuzzFeed budgets to BuzzFeed, we could drive additional revenue. As little as a 2% of a TV budget moved to us could drive up to 4.6 million additional in revenue. So it's not that we can't compete on the same scale as TV, but you can take a small percentage of the budget and actually have that small percentage work at a much greater rate. At the very least, we were seeing up to a 75% return, greater return than some of the traditional, and as much as a 2.2x greater return from some of the traditional media spots or media methods like TV and radio spots. Key finding number 2 is that BuzzFeed media, we drove a stronger lift over traditional media tactics within the specific prepared food category. So this is really our ability to move products off the shelves. The percentages, they look kind of small, but when you consider the vast scale of advertising that blankets the US, both online and offline, and the amount of products sold, these are fairly significant differences. And we were showing with the return on ad spend almost a 2x differentiation there. We're actually seeing that, compared to everything for these traditional, which encompasses out of home, print, TV, radio, that we're seeing a much higher lift and a much higher return on ad spend when using BuzzFeed media in comparison. All these learnings, they're fantastic, and seeing how we can compare them to traditional media is great, and we got some tremendous insights from them. But the big thing is we are a digital company, and since we wanted to really look at how BuzzFeed as a whole compared to traditional media categories. So key finding 3, we really looked at the liquor category when we dug deeper into this particular learning. We found that our return on ad spend was a lot higher than we had actually expected, and it was a great surprise. So seeing these numbers in here, $6.47 on traditional display, that's BuzzFeed as a whole. Our video, native content, and display, we were looking at those in particular and also comparing ourselves to those categories from a broad perspective. So we were starting to look at all of the other digital averages supplied by Nielsen to be able to see how did we compare. On a digital side, we were up by 28%, video up by 36%, post up by 27%, and display up by 40%. You will notice that the display is a little bit smaller. We were beginning really digging into our display, so kind of think this is a little bit more directional when it comes to display. The learnings there led us to really consider how we could move things around, how we could better create products that would work for our clients in the liquor category. After that, we dug deeper into how BuzzFeed compared to the other digital categories for the prepared foods category. And one of the things that we saw here was that our display really showed an outset of efficiency. So we were able to see how well that our display products were doing and how they were actually pushing a very efficient return on ad spend for our clients. But what was really surprising for us was to see how well our native content, so this is our post products that live on BuzzFeed, the native advertising, to see how well that was doing from an effectiveness standpoint. And it really stood out in the category as the thing that was pushing the most product off the shelf. So while we had a very high return on ad spend because the display product on a whole is fairly cheap in comparison to the post product, which is a little bit more expensive, but it was showing a much higher rate of pushing products off the shelf. So looking at how that plays out for the prepared foods category against all of the averages for the market, we were seeing that our total digital was up by 75%, video up by 77%, poster showing 123% above the averages, and display 139% for the return on ad spend, which we thought was pretty significant and very interesting. But next thing we wanted to learn was really how does that affect BuzzFeed? Where could we do better? What could we look at? One of the things that a lot of advertisers struggle with, and publishers as well, is looking at reach and frequency. It's a constant debate. It's something that's always coming up. And we really wanted to look in to see, could we do better, or were we already oversaturating the market with what we're doing? Good thing to know, we could actually be putting a little bit more media out there. So when we looked at this, optimizing the airings, and how we could do this, we found that by boosting our impression levels by as much as 10% for prepared food brands, we could actually be increasing effectiveness. We could also be increasing weekly video impressions, and we could also continue to boost that effectiveness as well by up to 13%. So we wanted to really figure this out and see where we could do better. And this has led us to a lot of changes internally, and also looking at how we could actually be working better with the clients that we try to service with our products. And that's really the key of what this entire the entire study was for. Was really, we wanted to make sure that BuzzFeed was doing well. We didn't really do this so that we could beat our chest and say, we're the best, spend all your money with us. The reason we took this on and why we invested in putting BuzzFeed through the entire same process that all of our advertisers put our media through when doing an MMM study is to really see what we were doing good at and what we weren't doing quite so well at. Like, where could we actually make changes? Where could we improve? And how could we better serve our clients as a whole? And that's really the key of what we wanted to learn and why we took on the challenge of putting ourselves through this mixed media modeling. And with that, I'm going to hand this back to Matt from Nielsen to talk about broader ideas and give you a bit of a break from hearing me and Sherry say BuzzFeed. Matt, all yours.
Sounds great. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. So moving into some recommendations, not just with regards to BuzzFeed specific, but just general recommendations that can be taken from a marketing mix model and practices that we definitely suggest other advertisers do. First, advertisers should invest in companies who have proven higher efficiency through testing of outcomes. In running a mix analysis, the real benefit is that you're generating quantified results about publishers or companies that are providing high returns for your product. For that reason, shifting your budget towards tactics and companies that are providing overall efficiency for your brand can lead to stronger in-market outcomes. So, making sure that you're quantifying what you're actually activating and understanding what's performing best can help you improve your business overall. Recommendation number 2, advertisers should test tactics within their own portfolio to drive highest efficiency in marketing spend. So, while having high-level results for different media types is useful and can provide, general aggregate directional learnings about how much you should be investing. That's a helpful thing to have. But it's also important to dive deeper. To look not just within a total publisher, but look, at the individual levers you can pull within a publisher's portfolio. It can provide further opportunity for optimization and better guidance when media planning. So, for example, in this situation with BuzzFeed, we saw different results for the different tactics between video, native content, and display, and understanding how those interplay with one another can definitely give a leg up against competition in determining what should be aired on to improve your overall performance. Okay. Recommendation number 3, by looking at their media reach and frequency, advertisers can see higher effectiveness within their portfolio mix, sometimes up to 13%. So response curves are model generated. They're determined based on best fit and can indicate an ideal range for tactics to execute within. So definitely keep in mind, looking at these response curves, the sales lift potential for being sufficient and operating within that range, and what exactly you would need to be in that range in terms of weekly airing guidance. Definitely prioritize this when you are media planning and determining how much you should be allocating to a brand, because again, those lifts you can have on your response and ROAS based on sufficiency can really move the needle and definitely give you, a different cascading priority of media types. Recommendation number 4, finding the optimal media mix is key for maximizing ROI. So even relatively small shifts in budget towards higher performing media can lead to large outcomes. Understanding just the magnitude of difference in terms of ROAS or response can definitely give your brand or company the opportunity to shift, small percentages, even like 2% of spend towards a tactic can lead to, very sizable differences in performance and revenue generation. So definitely keep that in mind. Keep an eye on which tactics are performing well for you, and keep in mind that shifts can, even small ones can really move the needle. And thanks everyone for listening to the presentation. If you have any additional interest in this, you can definitely view additional customer case studies, videos, and best practice content. Make sure to check out the new and improved Nielsen Marketing Effectiveness Resource Center, which is available at the link in this presentation. There should be some useful materials for you there if you'd like to dig into this further. Now that we've wrapped up, I want to pass it back to Stuart to go through any questions we may have received from the audience.
Great. Well, thank you, Matt, and thanks, Sherry and Josh from BuzzFeed for sharing some of your insights here. We're going to get to some audience questions in just a second. I just want to, again, remind everyone, first off, if you do have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool that you see there on the left side of your screen. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 10 minutes or so. If we don't get to your question, I always do make sure they get forwarded over to our sponsor, so there's always the opportunity for someone to respond to you offline as well. So again, please submit your questions. We're going to go through this over the next 10, 15 minutes or so. If you are interested in a copy of today's slide deck, you can find that right now in the Event Resources tab at the top of your screen. So go on in there. You can download a PDF of today's slides. Also, today's webinar has been recorded, and we're going to send everyone notification with a link over to that recording later this afternoon. So check your email about 3:30 Eastern Time. You'll get a link over to the on-demand version of today's webinar. So let's go into some of these questions that have been coming in. And Josh and Sherry, and maybe Josh, we'll start with you on this. We're just sort of wondering, what did you find sort of as you did this study, what was the biggest surprise learning that you sort of gleaned from this?
Sure. The biggest surprise for me was the TV comparison. Looking at TV as a categorical whole compared to BuzzFeed as a categorical whole was really, really surprising. I was not expecting to see quite that much difference in there. If anything, I was really thinking would be more on parity. So for me, that was the biggest surprise that I got out of it, for sure.
Shari, any surprises for you?
I would just add that changes such as small as 2% can have such an impact. So I think we all think we have to go big and test, really monumental changes, but a change as small as 2% can have such a significant impact on a campaign.
Right. I mean, especially in the categories that you were looking at, where the volume is so high. I would gather that in particular, that's the case. Matt, we had a few questions coming in here, and let me direct this to you. Sort of trying to understand, a little bit behind the methodology of a study like this. So just to sort of combine a few of these. First off, people were asking, like, how exactly are you calculating, the effectiveness and the effectiveness index? What it would sort of, are you using to sort of understand return on ad spend and things like that? Is it, driving product off the shelves, et cetera? As some of these comparisons here, can you maybe give us a little bit of just sort of an understanding of the methodology and what one gets on a report like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So marketing mix modeling works by taking sales data, which is available through answers on demand from Nielsen, and regressing it against the different media drivers that we're looking to understand, media and also non-media drivers. So what we're able to do there is, through that regression, determine the decomposition of each of those different media tactics and calculate things like response by understanding how much volume of the product was driven against how much execution was aired towards that particular media tactic. So that's how we generate our response, and the indices were essentially calculated as an average across the category that we were looking within in these studies, both prepared foods and liquor. In terms of ROAS, it's very simple. We take the revenue factor from the volume that we've driven and calc the revenue that was driven for a particular media tactic and compare that to the spend associated with that tactic. That's how we end up with that result. Overall, like the goal of a mixed study is to better understand the performance of these and kind of create comparisons to give useful insights to our advertisers.
Got it. So, Shari, maybe let me throw this one your way, and that was sort of understanding for a lot of the people here of where BuzzFeed sort of sits in, the sort of, I guess, marketing funnel. That's the model we're using these days. I was going to say path to purchase, marketing funnel, customer journey. Where exactly do you see sort of a lot of this? I mean, is BuzzFeed, is it being positioned primarily for brands as an awareness vehicle? Are you seeing it falling in, I'm sure there are a lot of brands now, and especially as you're doing more commerce, where you're sort of following through and really looking at conversion and not areas like that. But can you maybe give us a sort of a sense of where you see BuzzFeed and how brands are ultimately using it right now?
Sure. I would say, we are very diverse in the way that we work with our partners, which allows us to help at any level of that funnel. And we've been fortunate enough to have, case studies to show how we can build everywhere from awareness, to actually purchasing products. So that's what's exciting for me over here at BuzzFeed, is that we are able to approach each client and their specific goal in different ways to make sure that we're able to deliver on exactly what that goal is, whether it is just building brand awareness, intent, and then also moving items. Mm-hmm.
And the use, Shari, and maybe Josh, you might have an answer. There were a couple of questions came in, just wondering why, you were looking at prepared foods and liquor. Obviously, there's an alignment, and that falls into sort of where you are. Any reason for those specific two categories as you've gone through this?
Sure, I can handle that one.
Sure.
So the reason that we landed on prepared foods and liquor is before we actually started the analysis, we sat down with Nielsen and we did an analysis of all of BuzzFeed's media. What areas for MMM, because really the MMM studies apply to CPG pretty much categorically. So we looked at what areas within BuzzFeed we had enough impressions to, from a mega category level, to do this type of analysis on a publisher level. When you're doing it for a brand level, what you need in the model is a little bit different than when you're doing it against an entire category and the entire rest of the advertising industry as a whole. So that was why we landed on prepared foods and liquor, because those were the two that we had the largest amount of impressions for the category to do it.
Got it. So I want to just, again, remind our audience real quick, we're going to go for another few minutes here. So if you do have a question for our speakers, please, again, submit it using the question tool there on the left side of your screen. Josh, can we talk? I mean, it was really interesting as you were looking at this, and we saw some questions coming in about this, and in understanding sort of the role of video, the role of native executions, and of course, now that BuzzFeed has a significant display area, the role of display. So as you've done this, and as you did this study, and ultimately as you are working with advertisers, are you seeing again these different media, these different vehicles having different roles within the ad campaign? Are you seeing video? First off, is there an overlap between video and native, or are you looking at video as sort of video advertising as opposed to video content? And do you see sort of like how people use that at different parts of the funnel as they move people through?
Sure. So we're still blending a lot of these together, but we've started weighting their usage a little bit differently based on client KPIs. So now that we have this data, now that we understand what vehicles within the BuzzFeed advertising products actually work for either packaged foods or for liquor, and at what they're doing, we have these levers we can pull now. So we're blending them together based on the KPIs. And internally, we actually sat down and we redid a lot of our products and started re-gearing things to work even better within these models and try to increase their performance. And also based on which category they're in, weighting them a little bit differently. And on top of that, we still work directly with our advertisers, say, what are your goals? What do you see as a very efficient CPM within your models when you run them? And we work to tailor those. So it's just more of it's given us very flexible levers we can pull and a better way that we can plan that reflects directly what the advertiser is trying to achieve. For anything within video, we're using those very specific, a little heavier on the liquor side and leaning a little bit more into the posts for the packaged foods, but we still use both in every campaign.
And in the world of video, because there was a question that came on this, are you seeing differences in the types, right, of the long form video versus the are they called buzz cuts, right? The more short, the more snackable videos.
Yeah. So the buzz cuts in these two examples, the buzz cuts were actually in the display portion. The video was primarily tasty videos and some of the recipe videos like that. So the video was really a representation of tasty for the most part. If we're going to cut those back out, we would definitely be doing it now. And if we were to recut the data and redo it today, we would actually cut those out even deeper. When this data was pulled, that was really when the buzz cuts and these were in its infancy, which is why the display is a little bit more directional, because there was a little bit smaller size than Nielsen would have liked, or that we would have liked to have in the overall analysis. And so we still look at that as directional, but we did see that anytime we did the video with the buzz cuts, they did represent a very large percentage of the display that we did deliver inside the model. So for us, that directionally says that they do as well, if not even better than some of the traditional video, but we can't definitively say that at this point. We would need to do this again with another year of data to actually definitively make that differentiation.
Got it. I think we've got time for one more question here. So let me just, so people out there who are doing and doing their planning now who want to incorporate some of the data from a report like this into some of their own models, how might they go about getting this data? And Josh, is that for you, or is that on your side, Matt?
Might be for Matt, but if they want our data, it's pretty simple. So we work with advertisers all the time. So when they use the MM, all they have to do is just let us know that it's going to be part of an MMM model. And for our end, our process, the way that we work with all of our advertisers is we have our sales folks just ask, or if it's during the planning, just bring it up, and we'll make sure that on our end, we're prepped to have all the data collected and put together into the template that's either provided by the client, or if it's someone where we're working directly with Nielsen, we make sure we just have it into their standard template. And then we can send the data in to be a part of the MMM study. Now, to actually do an MMM study, that would actually, I would say that would go to Matt to do it from on that.
Right. Yeah, so
I get
Matt,
the data too, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add quickly to what you were saying, Josh, whenever there's a question about a particular advertisement or publisher, we definitely can explore internal agency or publisher provided data, just like Josh said with BuzzFeed, we worked with them to get the data for this analysis. So there's a bunch of solutions there. We're happy to explore that on a case-by-case basis to make sure that we get the data you need for your analysis.
Great. Well, again, Matt and Josh and Shari, I want to thank the three of you. We've got your contact info here up on the Q&A slide, so I just want to point that out to our audience here. So again, if anyone wants to reach out to you, that's the way to find our speakers today. So again, just a couple quick reminders here to our audience. If you do want the slides, you will find them in the Event Resources tab, top of your screen. We're going to send notification later today to everyone with a link to the on-demand version, so anyone can go over there and check that out. So keep your eyes peeled about 3:30 Eastern Time on your email. And lastly, please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, adweek.com/webinars. Sign up for one of our upcoming ones. Check out our archive of on-demand as well. So again, I want to thank our speakers today. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.